Hello, everyone. Welcome back to SEC Roundup. This is Tom Zucchero, I'm a partner at Paul Hastings White Collar Defense Group. And with me is my partner, Nick Morgan. Good morning, Nick.
Hey, good morning, Tom.
Nick is also a partner-in-law in Paul Hastings and a partner in the White Collar Defense Group. Joining us today, we're honored to have Anya Coverman from the Institute of Portfolio Alternatives. Hi, Anya. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's great to have this discussion.
And Anya is the Senior VP, Government Affairs, and the General Counsel of IPA. Honored to have you, Anya.
Thank you so much.
So today we're going to talk about an interesting investment, non-traded REITs, real estate investments. These are investments which are registered with the SEC, but not traded on any national exchange. And we're going to talk about an entity called NASAA, which is suggesting some unique regulation of these non-traded REITs. So Nick, let's start with you, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about NASAA and this particular investment.
Happy to, Tom. And of course, we really want to hear from Anya, who has more specific thoughts on this. This is a broader discussion, or sort of a two different modes of looking at securities instruments. The SEC model, which is focused more on disclosure and not on merit-based evaluations or prohibitions of particular instruments, and the NASAA model, which sometimes, and NASAA, by the way, is the North American Securities Administrators Association, which is a voluntary group of, as the name suggests, generally state securities regulators. So the NASAA model sometimes does get into merit-based evaluation of particular investment vehicles. So those are the two competing models that have sort of come together here with regard to non-traded REITs. And so the issue for this instrument and more broadly is it necessary for regulators to protect investors by prohibiting certain investments? And this brings to mind, of course, the famous event back in 1980 when the state of Massachusetts prohibited its citizens from investing in an IPO of a small company called Apple. So, obviously in that instance, the protection by prohibition model did not work out for the benefit of investors. You could point to other instances where it did prevent investors from losing money, but that's really what's at issue here with regard to this this proposal that's being considered by NASAA and the non-traded REITs.
So Anya, we're used to SEC regulation, which is disclosure oriented, not merits oriented. So a bad investment can be sold as long as the issuer gives proper registration and disclosure. So tell us about this proposal, and are states going to move to a merit-based registration system?
Yeah, thank you. Those are great questions, and probably some of the questions that haven't been asked a lot. It's important to point out that not all states are merit-based states. So some states are actually disclosure-based states. But taking a step back, these are federally registered products that we're talking about. So they go through a thorough SEC review and disclosure process in order to be publicly registered. The state component to that is called registration by coordination, which is exactly what it says. So you get registered with the SEC, and under state law, a non-traded REIT is subject to simultaneously effective regulation that goes effective as soon as the SEC process concludes, with the primary regulator being the SEC. Where the alternative to a registration by coordination standard is registration by qualification. And again, that's what it is, where you don't have a publicly registered program. So the state is putting their eyes on the process and doing a more detailed and thorough review. But with registration by coordination, it's if you look back at the history, you're supposed to only require as much information that the SEC itself is requiring. And again, you have simultaneous registration. So there are 4 new additional requirements that are part of this proposed revision by NASAA that would not be able to meet that would take months longer than meeting the simultaneous coordination and effectiveness standard that is supposed to exist, the concentration limits and determining additional disclosure requirements and income net worth. Again, this would really be contrary to what the regime is supposed to look like. And then another important point to point out is a lot of the justification for this proposal is about regulation best interest. But the state's view of Reg BI and what this proposal is doing and what Reg BI is, there's 4 very different components. Reg BI is product agnostic. The states, led by NASAA, did a regulation best interest survey process and report of broker dealers and investment advisors operating in states, but it was product specific. Reg BI is not product specific. Reg BI is a principles-based standard. This is a prescriptive standard. These are static requirements that, again, are very different than what regulation best interest is. And then finally, regulation best interest is about the intermediary. It's about the broker, or, you know, there are parts of Reg BI applicable to investment advisors in terms of Form CRS, but it's about the intermediary. These are issuer standards. The issuer does not control the conduct, the regulation of the intermediary. So there's a lot of differences that are getting mixed into product-specific guidelines. And just the big concern is that NASAA states in their proposal that they intend to use this as templates for other product guidelines. So all of these important nuances of the overlay with the SEC and SEC regulation is something that really needs to get thought about. That's probably lost a little bit as we're talking a lot about what's happening in the states. There's a real big SEC component here.
And I assume, Anya, you and your organization don't believe that merit-based approach is appropriate or necessary.
We aren't commenting on what's right or wrong in terms of the state's merit versus disclosure regimes, but what we are saying is what registration by coordination means. And if it means a simplified and coordinated process with the SEC being the primary regulator, then that does not equate to having standards and merit requirements that don't allow for simultaneous effective regulation. And again, these are dual registered products.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's really no other product or industry where that's subject to SEC regulation, where a regulator is stepping into the shoes of either the advisor or the issuer itself, and including ownership restrictions and concentration limits and things like that.
Terrific. Well, Anya, thank you so much for your insights. Very helpful to us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for attending, Nick. Thank you. And we'll see everyone back at our next SEC Roundup.